I'm Dingjo Curry, Director of the Community College CEO Think Tank and Strategic Solutions, as well as the Director for Leadership Institute for Tomorrow in developing new emerging leaders for our nation's community college systems. So really appreciate you come and join us in our conversation today. And you heard Rachel gave you a little bit of the background of today's webinar. It is part of the process. So last April at the AACC annual conference in Nashville, we convened a group of CEO think tank. And this is a gathering of community college presidents and chancellors from across the country using part of a liberating design working session to give CEOs a space to think together, and they did. I've asked them to do it boldly, honestly, and creatively, most important, and of course, strategically on the topic of redesigning partnerships to build workforce pipeline for the future and future for this new era. What I ask them to do is to think without constraints or any guardrails and wish as much as they want, which they don't get to do very often. And what emerged were what I thought some powerful ideas with provocative questions for CEOs to explore further at their home campuses or their systems statewide or with their legislatures and ideas for ed tech companies and business industries in particular, because this is about workforce, for them to ponder on the future developments. And those ideas were captured in our CEO think tank brief. And today's webinar is a continuation of that work. And this webinar is an opportunity, of course, for our panelists to reflect and share what was generated with a broader community. We will share the CEO Think Tank brief paper at the end of the webinar. And those of you who registered, and if you're watching this as a recording, the think tank paper should be accompanying this recording of the webinar. So this is an amazing partnership between the Community College Think Tank and Strategic Solutions with AACC, with much appreciation for their open arms to create the space for the CEOs. And then, of course, made possible with the Ellucian's partnership. So I am going to turn to my good partner from Ellucian,
Yeah.
LaQuea Purcell, to share what it means to Ellucian, first of all, to partner with us on the think tank in this creative space for our community college CEOs. And please introduce yourself too, LaQuea.
Okay. Yes. Thank you, Ding Joe, for having us. We consider this an incredible honor. My name is LaQuia Purcell. I'm the Senior Director of Industry Engagement and Government Relations at Lucian. Really briefly, in my role, I lead strategy at the intersection of education policy, technology, and institutional transformation. So I get to work really closely with higher ed systems, state agencies, and national organizations to build partnerships that advance student success, affordability, and workforce alignment. So this conversation is certainly right up my alley, and I think it's needed. To answer your question about why this is so important to a Lucian, I think, those of you in the session, all we do is higher ed. So we are singularly focused on higher ed institutions around the world. We partner with more than 2,900 institutions. We serve over 20 million students. So because of that focus, when higher education faces these structural changes, we feel it immediately. And I would say that we have the responsibility to respond. So the think tank for us, it really made clear that workforce partnerships are central to institutional sustainability and student success. The CEOs were rethinking models and AI-enabled alignment and employer co-design. All that's important because as colleges are evolving into workforce ecosystems, then the digital infrastructure must evolve with them. And so our role is really to power that transformation through AI, data, and these scalable platforms that connect learning to the livelihoods of these learners. And so it was really important to be in this space and to sponsor this space. So thank you for having us.
Thank you, LaQuea. I did not know the magnitude of the impact. I know Ellucian is big, but the numbers that you just shared is impactful. That's really significant. So thank you. We are honored to have three distinguished CEOs who were in the think tank with us last year in Tennessee. So let me introduce them. And first of all is Dr. Latricia Harrison, President of Houston Community College, Coleman College of Health Sciences, and Dr. Michael Holtzclaw, Chancellor of University of New Mexico, Los Alamos campus in New Mexico. And then third, we have Dr. Brian Shunk, Chancellor of University of Arkansas Community College at Batesville. Welcome. Welcome to our webinar and thank you for being here with us. So before I start with the panelists, I want to review some of the ideas generated from the CEO think tank on redesigning partnership. And this is just a quick sweep for you to get a glance about some of the ideas that have come up with. So for example, in the student-centered skill-first learning area, we have shift from degree credit hours to competency outcomes, but what does that look like, right? An AI-driven personalized learning, individual learning modules with real-time skill cap analysis. In the deep employer ecosystem integration area, there are ideas on having employers to be true partners. We know that employers have been partner, but they're talking about true partners for co-designing, co-teaching, co-ownership of the outcomes. And I think that is a wonderful space. And great ideas like a national skill database. What does that look like? And then real-time workforce dashboards. Those are all things that CEOs have dreamed about. And I think that they're not too far off. We could make those reality if we take it to the next step. So in the new funding and structural models, there's the new tax incentives and co-investment models with employers. I actually have tested out this idea with several employers, large employers nationwide, and they say that is like great. We don't have this kind of a tax incentive. So, and pay for performance education, replace the traditional transcripts. What would that look like? All of those are lots of ideas that have been shared, and you're just seeing a sprinkle of them highlighted here. Again, these are captured in the think tank paper in much more greater detail for you. So thank you. Now, let's start with some discussions with our panelists today. Uh, as CEOs, I know your calendars fill with conferences and convenings and lots of meetings to go to. I would just like you to share a little bit from your own experience in that think tank and what made the CEO think tank feel substantively different intellectually as well as, for you on thinking about strategy wise from a typical CEO gathering.
Yeah, sure, Dean Joe, I'd like to start. The session, it went beyond your typical information sharing session or the networking that we all do at conferences and focused, and you are a large part of that, make us think really deep about the problems that we're facing and more importantly, the solutions that might come. And you mentioned earlier, no guardrails to our thoughts, think as big as we want. So that was refreshing. We were challenged to envision these solutions to all of our most pressing issues. It was interesting to see how many we found that were in common amongst the fellow CEOs that were in the room. And I guess what I left away from that session was hope that the future is going to be bright. We're going to figure out this workforce issue and how to best work with the employers to make sure they have what they need. I also appreciate the fact that it was a collaboration with Aleutian and the fact that they're mission aligned. They provided a unique perspective. They let us know what's possible through their solutions. They let us know that things are scalable and that these concepts we came up with in the session can be taken nationwide.
Well, I'll jump in and I agree with what Brian said. It was very intimate And to be a new president at that time, I was able to come in and meet with other CEOs and really learn how to start looking at redesigning the workforce and education that we are offering to our students. So your capability to bring us together and to engage as a unit and really see that we're not on an island and we're all in this together and facing those challenges will help me to take those things back, those strategies back to my campus and to allow me to start to effect change, if you will, with the faculty and staff as well as the students.
I think one of the things that I really enjoyed about this opportunity is that we had a room full of CEOs, and that doesn't always happen at a conference. You've got folks from all different levels. So in some ways, it was a safer space to really be bold and say what needs to be said, but also to be working with others at the 50,000 foot level of thinking and in a strategic way of looking at some of the issues that we're all facing today. And I think it's wonderful. And Latricia said this as well, to know that you're not alone and that these are things that other folks are also dealing with, and so that you could create that collaboration and have thought partners on how people are approaching these issues in their context as well. And lastly, I just thought it was a lot more interactive and hands-on than a typical conference setting. People were just speaking at us, but we're actually getting to do some work and then reflect.
Thank you, Mike. Well, Lakoya, how was the think tank space proved valuable for Lucian's perspective in learning? You hearing, you're in the room,
Yes.
hearing some of these ideas and frustration sometimes too, the challenge and then the creative solutions.
Yeah, it was great to be in the room, not because everything that was shared was easy, but because it really gave us a strategic forward-looking insight directly into what CEOs are actively reimagining for their institutions. So from our perspective, that insight can't stay in the room. So we're able to bring those insights back to our product team, our engineers, as we innovate new features and capabilities. As I mentioned earlier, because of our broad reach across higher education, we can also connect those patterns across sectors, right? So we see where ideas are emerging, where pilots are happening, and where scale is possible. And we get to think about that across higher ed. And lucky for us, community colleges are innovating rapidly. They have to. And so that helps us with I would say the ecosystem more broadly. And then finally, I would say that the value is twofold. So we learn directly from presidents about what's next, but then we can help carry those ideas forward by, enabling that transformation, which is good for us. And then I would say, Ding Joe, it also brings me to a question that I have for the CEOs. If you would indulge me, when you set aside constraints and imagine employers as co-designers, funders, and co-owners of outcomes, what idea most disrupted how you think about the role of community colleges in workforce development?
I guess I'll jump in first if I may. Um, I think, first from context, too often we already have, you know, our advisory boards with our programs, but they often are advising after the fact of longstanding programs that are in place. So it's minor tweaks that go and get changed within our programs. It's only really when we develop a new program that we might engage and be more of a co-partner. And I think we need to do that on a consistent basis. And so to really be open to the fact that we rip the Band-Aid off and really look at the entire program and how it exists. Of course, we have some constraints to that because it's difficult to then switch that curriculum in a timely manner. And I think that is one of the challenges that we have to figure out how to address. The other thing that I think is important and will get better outcomes is if we are able to engage with our employers and have them teaching in our programs, not always even just as a guest lecturer or like that, but to actually hire them as an adjunct to come in and teach in our curriculum. Um, as a matter of context, Los Alamos National Lab is our primary employer in Los Alamos, New Mexico here. And so we're working with them to say, hey, you have a need for more welders, for example. We are also having a difficult time finding welding instructors. But if we were to partner and have one of your welding professionals come teach our students, you will get more welders, and you will get more welders that are specifically trained for the things that LANL, which is short for Los Alamos National Lab, needs in their new employees.
And I jump in as well. I think that's a great question. And Mike was right on point. What we're looking at in healthcare is partnering with those healthcare institutions, having their faculty staff come in as shared faculty, because that helps us to really help transition the students from a student to employee. And it helps with allowing them to really learn the healthcare system that they are going to particularly work for. So bringing those team members in as a part of our faculty really helps, but reshaping the curriculum and allowing the faculty to embrace that, because we tend to own it and it's mine. So trying to change the mindset to reshifting the thought process and curriculum development, and really allowing industry partners to co-sign and co-own that, I think will help us and has helped us in the transition in the workforce environment.
Yeah, and I'd like to share two ideas that really are takeaways. The first is a concept we've been working on for a few years, the College 3.0, which at the session we referred to it as the Career First model. And College 3.0 really takes us from originally we had access to college, and then 2.0 was success. And now it's the job, right? So think past the student walking across the stage. And our job is to get them into that career that's going to provide a living wage for them and their family. And the takeaway from that I built upon was I was introducing this concept to my campus, and I kept forgetting the part about the economic mobility. So even though we're focusing on graduate or careers instead of graduation, the reason we're doing it, the why behind it, is that economic mobility for the students. And I was able to come back from that session and say, listen, I've just been in a national conference. I was in a room full of CEOs, and they're all talking about the same thing we're talking about. And a lot of them are doing it. And we have to remember why we're doing it. We're doing it for the student to take from where they are to where they want to be. So that was the first idea. The second idea builds on this concept that Mike and Patricia both talked about with the employer co-investment. And me as a CEO, I realized that I need to be more active with our business and industry partners. I need to be out of the office more and really engaging them on how we can work together and partner together. We have a large employer, has over 1,000, little over 1,000 employees. We've gone to their facilities and helped them with training of their employees, but it's been in small break rooms and different scenarios and such, and it's been on an as-needed basis. In discussions with them, they ended up building a training building on site, and they've invited us as the community college in to help with everything from helping students with their GED to English as a second language, and all the way up through middle management and supervisor training. So they've seen the value in it. They've invested in it. They have persons dedicated to help us out. And more importantly, they give us feedback. If we provided training, they tell us what they liked, what worked well, and tell us what they need. So it was just a great opportunity to take some ideas, build upon what we know, and then learn some ideas and bring it back to my campus.
That is so good to hear, Brian, that you actually had gone back and posed some questions. And actually what you said set up for my next question. And that is indeed about this career first. So one of the most prerogative questions that was raised was, what if the end goal wasn't graduation, like the traditional higher ed? Because I think unique to community college, we have this twin mission, right? Transfer, yes, going on to 4 years, but also on the other side of it is workforce development. So what if the end goal wasn't graduation, but meaningful, like you said, economic well-being, well-paying employment? and with a long-term career, trajectory on mobility moving up. So from the AI era that we are facing now, what do you think as CEOs, organizational and cultural shift that would be required, that must take place to make this career first model really viable for many who come to the community college for that career?
Thank you, Dean Joe. I'll start here. I believe what we have to do is a shift change, a mindset change for our faculty and staff. We really have to encourage them to embrace the concept of AI and the evolving technologies that are available today, as well as embracing the student and knowing that we have people who are different learners. I'm sorry, I'm at an event, so it's loud in my background. So we just have to embrace the different learners that we have so that we can now make this shift and make it greater for the students.
Yeah, and I'll follow up. So first we had to make a mind shift with our employees on campus. Oftentimes in higher ed, we really get stuck in tradition. And that was a big takeaway is let's forget about what we've done in the past. Not everything. There's some good things there, but let's lift those constraints from our thinking and really think forward. So academic advising is the backbone of bringing students into the system, helping them through, and then now move them on to employment. We decided to switch from academic advising model to a navigator model. Not a lot of difference. I mean, there is, but really it was showing that we're serious about this, right? We're gonna not be saddled with the traditional way of doing things. We're going to do things that's best for the students. So we came up with this navigator model. We have navigators instead of academic advisors. That's worked out really well with the shift and to show that we're serious. Second, and this is a takeaway I had from the session, is we, wasn't myself, but the group came up with this idea of having a digital career twin. And at the time, last April at the think tank, it sounded like it was far off, years away. At that time, the first large language model was out and there was a lot of hype about it, but we hadn't learned as much. And then just, a short 10 months, it's really advanced. So the idea of a digital career twin is basically you would have an AI agent that would help you navigate your career, whether it's setting you up for the right education, whether it's applying for the next job. We all get busy with life and we all wish we had some kind of concierge that could be there and say, Brian, you need to be doing this next. Or Brian, we see that your skills match this job opening over here. Or Brian, you get this. So it's interesting that in just that short amount of time, there are now AI agents that you can, they're free to download. They're open source. Buy a real inexpensive computer, and now you have an agent that is doing tasks for you. It's not quite the digital career twin that we envisioned at the session, but that is much closer, and I do believe I'll see that before my career's over.
All right.
Yeah, I tell you, I
I
like
think
to
that
have a digital twin to come up for my career, even though I lived decades. I could still use one. Go ahead, Mike.
no problem. So actually, similar to what Brian did with academic advising, we still call them advisors, but we have trained all of our advisors in as career coaches as well. And so we're really kind of restructuring the student experience so that from the very beginning, we're thinking about a career outcome as we're working with them. And so it's not just about what courses, but where are you going and how do we help you get there? And trying to integrate internships, work-based learning, apprenticeships in part of their pathway. But I think another thing that we look at that we need to address in order to achieve this kind of work career first is we have to look at our funding formulas. Right now, they're very set up traditionally and rewarding schools for certificate and degree completions. Again, important, but I think if we really truly want to be revolutionary, that which is paid, it gets our attention. And so if our funding formulas have no outcome that gives us additional funding to run our institutions, that isn't around career-based, it's really hard to put a lot of energy and redesign in that way. And so I think we really have to look at our states, um, and figure out ways to encourage and move towards a career focus. Because the bottom line, except for some lifelong learners, everyone is going to school because of a career outcome. And so I think it's time that we realize that and to really adjust with it. In terms of AI in particular, I think one of the things that we have is very exciting is AI. We know is a disruptive technology. All new technologies can be, and there will be, loss of jobs, but there's going to be creation of a lot of new jobs as a result of AI, and and this will move really quickly. And of course, our curriculum design doesn't move so quickly, and so we need to find a way through our non-credit and short-term training how to position students so they're ready for these new jobs that we don't even know exist right now, and need time to actually develop the curriculum with that and support alternative credentialing. We all know more and more students are looking to YouTube to learn how to do something. Um, and how do we incorporate that? They've learned a skill. And how do we actually give them credit for that and let them move on and not have to re-demonstrate that?
Yeah, I love what you said, and truly, we do want to be revolutionary, and we can, especially in this era of rapid changes. Well, Lakoya, you're the only corporate presence here with us, so I'm going to turn to you. Having you heard from our president and chancellors, what I'm going to have two questions for you, and this: what signals are you seeing across the industry, right, as corporate employers out there, that the traditional workforce models are maybe no longer sufficient for the employers, corporations out there? And specifically, my second question is for Lucian. If Lucian, as an employer, and I don't know how many employees you have, so if Lucian were to partner with a community college, okay, set aside the technology part, but on your workforce part, if Lucian were to partner with community college, what kind of innovative workforce partnership would you be most interested in pursuing with community colleges?
That's a really great question. And I think for that first part, I want to wear my government relations hat because the signals are both institutional and policy driven. It's been great to hear from the presidents. I would say at the federal and state levels, we're seeing a clear shift towards outcomes-based funding, short-term credentials, skills transparency, and stronger employer alignment, right? So policymakers I'm hearing are increasingly asking questions like, are students completing with in-demand skills? Are programs aligned to regional workforce needs? Do our learners have the skills needed to recruit new companies into our state? And at the same time, we're hearing others in the industry and employers are pressing for faster credentialing cycles, credit for prior learning, and then measurable competencies, right? So not just degrees. If a Lucian, taking all that in mind, if a Lucian was to put or to pursue innovative workforce partnerships, a couple of things come to mind. I know that you said don't focus solely on the technology, but I must say AI-enabled credit for prior learning and skills validation would be is something that we'd be interested in. From a policy standpoint, there is tremendous bipartisan interest in accelerating time to credential and reducing costs for adult learners. So, really powering the workforce in that way. And then, secondly, regional workforce data ecosystems. As I think about it, collaborations where institutions, employers, and possibly state agencies can share trusted data around skills, job trends, and outcomes. And those are real conversations that we're hearing when we can get the higher ed ecosystem around a table. Is like, how do we share this data to really empower students and accelerate them into the workforce so that they can have economic mobility? So we're really excited about the opportunity to move beyond some of these pilot programs and instead align institutional innovations, excuse me, with policy momentum.
Mhm.
So yeah, I would say that's my perspective. being able to really build off of all of these great ideas that are happening, and the industry is signaling that we should move forward with a lot of these great ideas.
Yeah, thank you. And then you talk about piloting, right? So my next questions for our panelists is that, community colleges are very agile, versus the 4 years. No discredit to 4 years, but we have to change and swift so quickly, community colleges. So we're excellent at piloting, so just so that we could meet the changing needs. So community college being so good at piloting innovation, but a lot of times we lack successful scaling, right? Across the system, across the nation, across the state. Sometimes these pilots reside at a particular college. For example, like Brian mentioned, some of the things that he's doing on his campus. So from your perspective, leaders, what leadership conditions must exist for ideas like competencies based pathways, those work integrated, and all those, just in time credentials, the employer or employer co-investment to move beyond the pilot phase to a system-wide practice? CEOs, what do you think leadership condition need to exist for that to happen?
I guess I'll take this first. I think um, part of it is we have to be very strong in saying this needs to happen, and so you just got to have that commitment. But you need to have the commitment also from your partners and your local businesses and industry. So if this is something that they need for their new workforce, we have to prepare and we have to really collaborate to get that done. Because I think what happens, and we see this all the time, higher ed and community college, we have our own systems that we have to navigate with, accreditation and state regulations, et cetera. Um, and business operates at a different speed and under different constraints and opportunities. And I think that, really explain that to our business community about this is what we can do and how we can do it, but this is what we'll need from you. And I'll use an example that we've had an excellent outcome here, and that was where one of our local partners, I mentioned it before, Los Alamos National Labs, needed mechanical engineering students. They need more and more employees with a bachelor's of mechanical engineering. But as a community college in our state in New Mexico, we're not allowed to offer bachelor's degrees. And so between the need that we had in our local community, one of our largest employers in the state, we were able to work with our central campus, University of New Mexico, Albuquerque, that of course can grant graduate programs, bachelor's, and all that. To bring that program, we taught the first 2 years. They are teaching the second 2 years, and so that we have a locally produced bachelor's in mechanical engineering students. And most of the people that are doing that are actually incumbent employees at the lab that want to move up. And so when we partnered with them, we had the clout to really make this happen. And it was harder for our main campus to say, well, it's not convenient across the state for us to be offering another program across the state. But with the size of our employer and partnering together to say this needs to happen in order for our community and for this organization to move forward. So I think that's an exciting time when you can really see that they both align, and then they can understand that it might take some times, but the end result will be better for everyone.
Okay. What about Brian? You want to chime in on that?
Yeah, I will. And I agree. It's like Mike said, it's the leadership. You just have to. We know what's right to do, and we need to do it. So I guess the first example I can give is with the employer engagement. We have to build into our systems where the employers are engaged. We can't leave it up to campus to make sure they're engaged. We all are familiar with the advisory boards that we have, and oftentimes they only meet once a year. And I don't know how engaged those conversations are, whether they're 1 hour or a full day, but once a year with check-ins in between really doesn't get us. So as leaders, we have to push really hard to make sure it's baked in that the employers are engaged. And what I found on campus in the few instances we've been able to do that or at least work toward doing that so far, is our faculty and staff are excited and happy to work with the employers. It's something they've been wanting. They just didn't know how to go about doing it. So take the initiative as leader to make sure that happens. And then the second thing I'll touch on is something that Latricia said earlier. She talked about the faculty and staff and getting the buy-in there. Um, as we make this switch from the credit hour to these competency-based outcomes, a lot of faculty and some staff, they have concerns, general education faculty especially. And we just have to reassure them that doesn't mean that what you teach, the knowledge you have to impart upon our students is not necessary. It's as necessary or more than ever. I hear from employers all the time, what do you need? And one of the first things they say is communications. So our English faculty, they're very important. They've been able to solve problems, to reason. Our math and science faculty, they're very important. But we need to help them understand what their role is, and how they're involved. So they're as important as ever, but we have to work really hard to foster that culture where they're not worried about going from for credit to competency based.
That's great. Latricia, do you have
Thank
anything to add to that?
I would agree with both Brian and Mike and what they're saying. And I just believe that as the presidents, we have to be visible. We have to jump in and lead by example. Our teams want to see us and know that we're supporting them and we are a part of the change that we're asking them to implement, and creating those partnerships and bringing the partners in as well to engage and participate, be our true partners, I think is going to make a difference.
Mm. Can I just jump in really quickly, Ding Joe, and say that definitely appreciate everything that everyone has shared. And I know prior to answering that question, I was throwing out a bunch of this is what's going on in policy, but I have a really techie question for the group. If you had the authority to launch one radical experiment tomorrow without waiting for policy approval or any of those things, what would it be?
Yeah, I'll start with that one. And this is something we talked about, an idea that I really found interesting, a national skills database that uses AI to match the skills of the students, what they have, whether they've completed their education or not, but even their current skills with what the employers need. Um, yeah, there are plenty of students looking for jobs. There are plenty of employers that need jobs, but they're two ships passing in the night, and that shouldn't be. So I envision this national skills database, with all the AI we have, it can match those students and those employers together. And then the other thing that I would tie into that is we talked about funding earlier, but you could build this model. And another thing I learned at the session, I hadn't thought of it before, but it's going to sound hard to say this, but rather than charge tuition and fees for the student up front, you evolve into this model where the employer finds a student that came through you, they hire them, and then they pay the college for the training that was provided. Or it could even be the other way around. Maybe the student, when they get their job, that's when they pay for the education they receive from the college.
Those are great, Brian. A couple of things that came to mind with this is, well, thinking back to the think tank, it was really interesting because someone, I can't remember who, mentioned we need to kill the Carnegie unit. And it still sticks with me today. This was developed in 1906 and it's still governing how we do things. Seat time, you have to be butts in seats so long before you demonstrate competency. But we know that just time in seat does not really mean that you've learned things, and some students might need less time in the seat to actually learn that. So I think if we were to, kill the Carnegie unit and find a better way to do competency-based education, we're going to have students move through things, our programs faster, for less money, which is beneficial to everyone. And we're also more likely to have more completers of our certificates and degrees. So it really, I think, is something that we need to look at to really talk about how do we make education relevant in the 21st century and not relying on kind of old rules and standards. And then the other thing I think about this that I it's not just a radical idea, but I'm really thinking about this for my institution, is how do we require an apprenticeship, a paid, and this is important that they all have to be paid, apprenticeship, internship, or work-based learning for every student who's certificate or degree seeking student in our institution, because that is really um, doubly helpful both in terms of having them ready for the workforce, but also helping them understand their direction and pathway. So those are my two ideas.
Love that. Yeah, I remember that the Kill Carnegie. Was there a movie called Kill Bill? This is going to be Kill Carnegie. Agree.
I would agree. Mike took my answer. Looking at work-based learning, I'm a nurse practitioner by trade. And in healthcare, you have so many accrediting bodies that really govern what you can do. And allowing students that apprenticeship model would be ideal for me, because if a student can learn while they're earning, I think that we would have so many more successful providers and students in general, because now they have an incentive to go to school. They get to do exactly what they want to do, not because my parents told me to, or not because I need a job, but now I am motivated and I am driven to achieve this goal because now I see the reward at the end. So I think if I had to develop a true radical idea, it would be actually implementing that work-based model for all of my students.
Great. I don't think it's that hard, is it? Right? Come on,
Oh,
let's just do it.
oh, it's
So
hard. It's
I
very hard in
know.
healthcare.
Absolutely. Laquera, Lucian is a very good friend of community colleges, a very good friend. So, from your experience as an outsider working a lot with the community colleges, I want you to be an honest, good friend. And what is it that frustrates you when work with a community colleges, and what do you see as the biggest barriers for the system, or policy changes that will make new breakthroughs?
hmm Yeah, that's such a great question. And given their answers, you can tell that it's not will, right? It's barriers. And so, because I love all those big ideas, and can I just quickly plug apprenticeships? I lead thought leadership at a Lucian, and we do a student voice report every year. And last year we looked at stop outs and opt outs, and we asked them like, what would make you return? How do you want to learn? And we were surprised to see apprenticeship rise to the top, right? We're a tech company. We're asking questions. And then they're saying, we want these hands-on learning. So I think the big ideas are spot on. And like you said, Ding Joe, we can accomplish anything when we put our minds to it. But there are barriers out there that I want to call out. I would say first, just funding models. I think, Brian, you may have touched on like the funding that would be available, but most state and federal frameworks are still tied to these credit hours and these legacy definitions of completion. And obviously, we're trying to move past that. So, even as these presidents and these community colleges are exploring these competency-based pathways and skills-first models, innovation is happening and policy isn't catching up. And that's one of the things that we want to advocate for. You talk about us being a good friend to community colleges. So when we're in those spaces, we want to bring those things forward. Um, Going back to something that Brian said earlier again, that about data. And so the fragmented data infrastructure. So I'm always thinking like systems first because I do so much policy and state work. And I really like the idea around real-time workforce dashboards and these shared skills of databases. But they do require cross-sector data alignment. And whew, that is a lot. It can be a lot. It's hard without common standards and trust agreements. And so even when, Latricia was talking about apprenticeships and just all those like little barriers along the way that you have to cross, it feels big. And then I would say, lastly, governance complexity. So, community colleges operate within like layered accountability systems. Y'all know that way better than I do. Y'all know about the boards and the accreditors and faculty and governance and legislators, all of these things. So system change really does require alignment across all of them. And That is tricky, and I know you're solving for that, Ding Joe. You're bringing people together, but it's not for the lack of bold ideas. It's really, I think the presidents are ready. The challenge is really aligning policy funding and infrastructure so that those ideas can really come to life.
Yeah, you mentioned the different layers of barriers and how do we peel them, right? One layer at a time. But I'm thinking that not one layer at a time, how might we bring all these constituency, all the different layers, right, to come together to talk about this? I think that if we could be unified on the vision of what makes sense best for students and for employers who need our students to be ready workforce, right? And that's beauty of community colleges. So every zip code has a community college for them, and that our graduates, our students who come from the workforce in serve local employers, serve the community's economic vitality. So I think that if any system can do it, I know we have the community college, and if we could have that space, just like the think tank, I have full confidence. And you're in government relations and policy space. I love that. I can see that we can pick your brain on how might we bring policymakers together.
Important, important. And that's what we're thinking about too. I want you to get to your other question, but we are thinking about how we bring our community college presidents and legislators in the same space. We've done that recently in Mississippi. I think there's opportunities to do that in other spaces because it makes sense for us to be doing that.
All right. I'm sure not only our panelists here, but other CEOs would be most interested in working with you on that. Okay, I'm going to turn to our panelists as your final reflection. Since leaving the think tank and then today, refreshing, talking about some of these ideas. What is one question that maybe you haven't asked and maybe you want to ask or should ask now, or you are already asking your cabinet or your board or faculty or your legislature, anybody really, that what question, what if there's one or even multiple ones, that one that would intentionally designed to challenge the assumptions that we've had, the traditions that you talked about, and spark new ways of thinking, of new ways of partnering.
Um, I'll start, I guess. I think kind of in terms of the question, and I'll fill in around that, but kind of how can we better utilize AI and other forms of technology to support our students? Um, and really kind of underneath all that is we need to know more about our students and their needs. And I think that AI and some other technologies will help us there, but also to help us as an institution, our faculty and our staff to utilize technology in a way that allows them to focus on their highest, best skills and maybe have some of these other things take care of the lower level stuff. We're not going to, we don't have a large enough campus that we have all these specialists that are working side by side with each of our students. And so if we can utilize technology to reach out and support students in many ways that when we really need that counselor to come in or whatnot, that they're ready to do that. We just are launching actually Ed Sites on Monday, which is an AI bot that reaches out to students and checks in with them. How are you doing? That not only helps them navigate our institution and directs them to supports if they're saying, I'm really struggling, I'm food insecure. We're finding students, when we looked at this technology, they're more likely to divulge personal things to a bot than a person. It's easier to tell a computer program that I'm hungry or I'm struggling with my mental health than it is a person sometimes. So it helps them then get connected to our resources. It also helps us understand we can make all these assumptions about what our students need. Through this technology, we can better understand to say, no, we really need more support in mental health, or no, actually, it's really food insecurity or housing insecurity, et cetera. So we're going to be making more data informed decisions. And then I think that that extends even beyond to look at how we can use technology. And Brian mentioned something that came up at the think tank about your career coach or AI twin. With that, we can do it with tutoring. We can do career development, career exploration. The possibilities are endless in that regard. And I think that's really an exciting time, and it's something we're trying to focus on.
Yeah, Mike, I'm glad you started that with your question because I had two questions in mind. One of them was that AI technology and how can we use that. But the one I landed on, the question that I'm asking now is, what if every program had to prove its workforce value every year through real world placement data? Right? So we're not doing that now. We have program reviews, and with our accreditor, it's once every 10 years. With the state, it's once every 7 years. We have some that are once every 5 years. Internally, we look at every program once every year, but we're not looking at the employment data, the outcomes data. Where are the students going to work? Are they making a family sustaining wage? What's that future look like? So that's my question that I've been asking the people in my circles is, what if every year we looked at each program to see what the real world placement data was? It does a couple things. One is we've talked a couple of times now about doing the things the way we've always done them. It's time to break from that. Some of those things are still completely valid, but some need to be updated. And then the other thing it does is it keeps the industry needs in mind, which we've done a good job over the years looking what industry needs, but it also places the student and that economic mobility at the forefront, right? We're always looking what's the outcome, not graduation, not walk across the stage, a good career for our students, family sustaining wage.
Those are very good questions, very similar to what I'm asking. One is, how do we incorporate AI into our daily teaching? But the other part of it is looking at retention and completion. So, what I'm asking my team to do is, how do we look at the social determinants of health, and how does that impact our students in their completion and retention? Because if a student has food insecurity, they cannot study. So and we don't really know because students don't always come and inform us of those things. So now we have piloted a program to look at how do we incorporate AI to create this questionnaire to determine the social determinants of health. Are the students unhoused? What are their challenges that they may not be sharing so that we can address those needs, remove those barriers if we can, so that the students can complete, so that they can go and obtain a sustainable career and lifestyle.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I want to thank each of you, President Harrison, Chancellor Holtzclaw, and Chancellor Shunk. Thank you for joining us. I know how busy you are, and I know that President Harrison, you're even right in the middle of an event, so really appreciate that. You know, the Community College Think Tank and Leadership Institute for Tomorrow is working on the next steps to some of these ideas that you have come up with, and enlarge that design circle, if you will. I talked about it to bring other constituencies in. You know, definitely the seeds are planted. So we're looking for fertilizer to really help germinate some of these ideas and make them really grow. And as revolutionary as it is, it's still possible. So it's just if we will it and if we really work at it, right? And a big thank you to Lucienne for joining us and making the CEO think tank very possible. We hope that you will continue to be a good partner in this space. And also, Rachel, thank you, AACC, for hosting this webinar and continue to host our CEO think tank. And as promised, I don't know if you're able to drop the paper for those who are here today in the chat for you. If not, we'll make sure that it's emailed to you. And please use, use it generally to generate discussions on your campus and in your communities. LaQuaya? I
Yes.
welcome you to say something.
Yes, yes, yes. I'll be very brief. I'll close by simply saying that Ellucian believes in the power of partnership. This is what this is all about. As I said, all we do is higher ed. We know community colleges are central to workforce mobility, economic opportunity, and what we heard from this think tank is bold thinking, and we want to support that. So I would just say that at Ellucian, we are very proud to stand alongside of community colleges, not just supporting innovation, but helping to scale it. We talked about that today because when partnerships are intentional and when they're aligned, I always believe this, students don't just complete programs, they build our futures. And so it's all about the students, it's all about the learners. And so I am grateful to be in space with all of you. So thank you for having me.
Thank you, Latoya, and thanks to again to Lucian as our good partner. Well, presidents and chancellors out there, if you are watching this webinar, we invite you to be at our CEO think tanks in 2026. You should be able to join any or all of them. We have the next one is actually February 23rd, 24th in Atlanta, Georgia. That's coming up in a week, sponsored by End-to-End Lightly AI. And of course, you are going, right? All of you are going to Seattle in April for the AACC annual convention. I look forward to that every single year. And there's registration if your CEO want to join our CEO think tank there at AACC. When you register for the conference program, you automatically can check the CEO think tank. If not, you can always reach out to ACC or get in touch with me at dingzhou at ccthinktank.org, and I'll be sure to include you in our think tank. All right, and I'm going to turn this over to Rachel to close.
Thank you. Thank you to all our panelists and to Lucian. This was a great conversation. We will be sending out the brief and the recording of the webinar to all participants in the next few days. So keep an eye out for that. And thank you again. And I hope everybody has a good weekend.
Bye-bye, everyone. Thank you.